Again, good morning, everyone. My name is Garhen. Welcome to Awaken the World. And this morning's discussion is on the false sense of ownership. And this is, in my mind, a very important video because a lot of our issue in our inter-issues, in our interrelationships with others, has to do with this false sense of ownership. And that false sense of ownership applies to pretty much everything. And I do have another one of my storyboards here to show. So we're going to pop this up and lock it into place. And we're going to talk about different concepts of ownership. And the first and overwhelming concept comes from that false sense of I, the ego. The idea that something is mine. And here's the interesting thing about the ego is it doesn't matter whether what's mine is a $1 toy from the dollar store or a $100,000 car. The ego treats it the same way. As soon as the ego becomes attached to it, as soon as the ego has invested part of its identity in it, that mine takes over. And the real question to ask, is it actually possible to own anything? Now, I'm not sure who the First Nations chief was who said it, but you know, in essence, he basically said that this earth has been bought and sold so many times over that no one would know who actually owned it anymore, anyways. And that's really the ridiculousness of it, okay? Here we are, a species on this planet, and we assume that everything that we lay eyes on is ours. And, you know, again, we can go right back to the Old Testament in the Christian Bible for the start of that whole problem. The idea that man was given dominion over this earth. There is no such word for dominion. That word did not exist in the Bible. It was shoved in there. The actual word is stewardship. And stewardship is totally different than dominion. We act and live as if we have dominance, as if we own and possess this planet and everything on it. And in fact, that is not the case. We are stewards. The infinite sea of consciousness that is responsible for the creation of all things, God, the Creator, is and pervades all things, including us. How could I possibly own that which is not me, not mine? Everything. Everything we do, everything we say, everything we manufacture, everything we manifest, everything we think, everything we feel belongs to that infinite sea of consciousness. It is all one, manifesting itself in a myriad number of forms, all designed to grow consciously and evolve and look back upon itself in wonder. This is the truth of our being. In that, ownership cannot exist. This false sense of self, this egoic I that thinks it is a singular being, okay, is the cause, the root cause of the problems we face between each other at every level. And as I've said many times before, it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about an entire civilization, okay, one nation against another nation, or one neighbor against another, one family member against another. It's all ego, all that same thing. And you know, it can be very innocuous on the surface when we look at it, i.e. with my wife, It's always, well, my children, that's my grandchild. And she never gets to see her other two children or her grandchild because they refuse to give her the time of day. I always remind her, honey, this sense of ownership of your children, this sense of ownership of a grandchild is not real. It comes from the ego. The idea that you own your children, that they're your children. And whether we're aware of it or not, the ego will behave the exact same way as if someone had stolen that little $1 toy horse from the dollar store. We see it all the time. I saw it in my wife's ex when things had finally came to a head and he figured that she was a possession. And this is the way we treat each other. And indeed, in those things we think that we possess, what happens is we ourselves are possessed by it. I'm going to give you a very real example, okay? You go out and you buy yourself a new $60,000 sports car. And these days, granted, $60,000 is not a lot of money to a lot of people, but it would be a very expensive car in my pocketbook. That car you think you own soon begins to cause you pain. You know, you park it at the mall and you have to park it away from other cars because you're worried about it being scratched. And lo and behold, one day someone dents it. And now the vehicle you thought was yours and giving you so much of whatever you thought it was giving you isn't anymore. It doesn't look shiny and new anymore. Or maybe it's the insurance costs or the cost of the car itself. Those things we try to possess will cause us pain sooner or later. You know, you got to give a lot of respect to Yoda. I mean, he had it right. Let go of what you fear to lose the most. And I would change that and say, let go of everything. Just let it go. Nothing you think you own was ever yours to start with. At best, you have a very short-term lease. At best, you have a short-term lease. Maybe 30, 40, 50 years at most. You know, if you're talking about your house, maybe 60 years. But sooner or later, it will decay, it will fall apart, it will return back to the original state in which it was in, or it will pass on to someone else. We are stewards. We are capable of owning nothing. And it's really funny that we're willing to take ownership of a car or the perceived ownership of a car, but we're not willing to take ownership of our own thoughts. One of the big issues tied up in concepts of ownership, which we see all the time, is the right to possess it. The idea that you have the right to own anything. That's my 1 foot of grass over there on that corner. Your fence is on my property. How dare you step into my space? This is mine. I own it. Get out. We build fences around what we own. Walls, security. We put guard dogs to protect what we own. Is there any joy in that ownership? Is there an advantage in our false concept of ownership? And of course the answer is no. When you own something, you think you can do with it what you will. And what I see more and more and more is people that own things do not look after them. Why? Because they're so caught up with the idea of ownership that as soon as they own one thing, it's not enough. And now they want to go own something else because the first thing they owned did not fulfill them the way they helped. And as we said in the previous video on the human doing versus human being, a human doing will simply go out and do some more to get something else. something else to own, in the hopes that that will be the thing to produce happiness. And of course, it never, ever does. Stewardship offers a different solution. When you understand that you are simply a steward of the Master's house, and when I say the Master's house, I am speaking of all of creation. Excuse me. Stewardship allows you to care for something, to improve upon it, but to not be attached to it. Just like those sandcastles on the beach, you understand that the things you think you own actually belong to creation. They belong to life. They're expressions out of life itself. The ground state of all being, that infinite sea of consciousness, that one, all-pervasive one, is what is producing everything we see here, including us. Where in there do we see the right to own anything? You know, time and time again, I am reminded of Chief Seattle and his 1854 speech on the environment, but it speaks volumes of the difference between ownership and stewardship. And with your permission, I would like to read that to you. The President of Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land. But how can you buy or sell the sky, the land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of the earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every meadow, every humming insect. All are holy in the memory and experience of my people. We know the sap which courses through the trees as we know the blood that courses through our veins. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfume flowers are our sisters. The bear, the deer, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The rocky crests, the dew in the meadow, the body heat of the pony, and man all belong to the same family. The shining water that moves in the streams and rivers is not just water, but the blood of our ancestors. If we sell you our land, you must remember that it is sacred. Each glossy reflection in the clear waters of the lakes tells of events and memories in the life of my people. The water's murmur is the voice of my father's father. The rivers are our brothers. They quench our thirst. They carry our canoes and feed our children, so you must give the rivers the kindness that you would give any brother. If we sell you our land, remember that the air is precious to us, that the air shares its spirit with all the life that it supports. The wind that gave our grandfather his first breath also received his last sigh. The wind also gives our children the spirit of life, so if we sell our land, you must keep it apart and sacred, as a place where man can go to taste the wind that is sweetened by the meadow flowers. Will you teach your children what we have taught our children, that the earth is our mother? What befalls the earth befalls all the sons and daughters of the earth. This we know. The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. One thing we know, our God is also your God. The earth is precious, and to harm the earth is to heap contempt upon its creator. Your destiny is a mystery to us. What will happen when all the buffalo are slaughtered, the wild horses tamed? What will happen when the secret corners of the forest are heavy with the scent of many men, and the view of the ripe hills is blotted with talking wires? Where will the thicket be? Gone. Where will the eagle be? And what is to say goodbye to the swift pony and then hunt? The end of living and the beginning of survival. When the last red man has vanished with this wilderness and his memory is only the shadow of a cloud moving across the prairie, will these shores and forests still be here? Will there be any of the spirit of my people left? We love this earth as a newborn loves its mother's heartbeat. So if we sell you our land, love it as we have loved it. Care for it as we have cared for it. Hold in your mind the memory of the land as it is when you receive it. Preserve the land for all children and love it as God loves us. As we are part of the land, you too are part of the land. This earth is precious to us. It should also be precious to you. One thing we know, there is only one God. No man, be he red or white, can be apart. We are all brothers, after all. It's a moving speech to me, it really is. White man in his ignorance moved out into the world and has decimated First Nations cultures across the globe. Most of them done so through missionaries in the name of Christianity and in the name of God. And if there is a judgment day coming, that is what needs to be judged. This beautiful planet, every one of us, every single physical manifestation belongs to that creative sea of consciousness. What room in there do we think we have the right to claim ownership over anything? This has been Garhen for another edition of Awaken the World. Much love to you and hopefully some deep thoughts today. Namaste.